In episode 2, we mentioned how space was one prong of Elon's grand plan. Then in episodes 11 and 12, we basically covered the reasons behind Elon's desire for humanity to be a multi-planetary species. That is, to nurture the spirit of exploration, save humanity from possible extinction, and extend the light of human consciousness. It's now time to look at how he was going to accomplish all this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
For those who know a little bit about SpaceX's history, they know that Elon didn't start out planning to found a rocket company. Always a fan of space, he initially just wanted to reignite interest in space because, well, not much was going on. Around the turn of the millennium, the space shuttle was still flying, but not many were paying attention anymore. As Neil deGrasse Tyson put it, the shuttle had gone boldly where we had gone hundreds of times before. To try and shake things up a bit, Elon, with his new money and fame from PayPal, had an idea to send a greenhouse to Mars, a project which he dubbed Mars Oasis. The plants would grow and images would be sent back, ideally creating excitement for future space exploration. It was too expensive to carry out the plan using rockets purchased in the US, so he looked into Russian rockets. These were not only too expensive as well, but in addition to that, the Russians thought that Elon was not really serious and didn't know what he was doing. So that turned into a dead end. Undeterred, Elon kept looking for ways to make his project work. But the more Elon researched and discussed the project with space industry veterans, the more the plan began to change. He wanted humanity to go to Mars and beyond, but he became doubtful that NASA could or would lead the way. Elon ultimately concluded that it would be much cheaper to make rockets himself, and thus SpaceX was founded in June 2002, and less than 2 decades later, it became the world's undisputed leader in providing launch services. As an aside, Elon really takes to heart the saying, if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. Again, he didn't plan to start a rocket company, but when he saw that no one else was getting the job done, he decided he needed to take action. This is a pattern we'll see again and again when studying Elon's professional career.
In the history of spaceflight, only 4 entities have launched a space capsule into orbit and successfully brought it back to the Earth: the United States, Russia, China, and Elon Musk.
In a way, you would think that others would have done it sooner than Elon and SpaceX. After all, we put a man on the moon in 1969, and the shuttle program had been ferrying cargo and astronauts to space for decades. Surely some determined private companies could do the same. To be sure, there are some very obvious challenges that make the space industry so hard to break into. A super high barrier to entry. Dabbling in amateur rocketry, where you build small rockets and shoot them off in the desert, is already a somewhat expensive hobby. But designing and building something that's supposed to deliver cargo to at least lower Earth orbit necessarily takes millions of dollars, and the return on investment is extremely uncertain. A high degree of technical expertise is required in several areas: engine design, rocket design, telemetry, communications hardware, and on and on. The talent you have to amass to undertake the challenge is truly intimidating, far more than many other industries, and there's just no way to get around it. It's a wonder that any private companies were able to do it at all. Regulatory approval. You have to have people who can deal with the appropriate government bodies and personnel, do all the associated bureaucratic steps like applications, permits, and impact reports. There's necessarily a ton of paperwork to do if you hope to launch rockets that do real work. The danger. I don't think I need to say much about this. Basically, launching rockets is pretty much pass-fail. There's not much in between. One small slip-up, miscalculation, or overlooked detail, and you could end up losing millions. Or worse. Notwithstanding all these obstacles, there are indeed a few adventurous individuals who have taken upon themselves the challenge of space with varying degrees of success. English billionaire Richard Branson founded Virgin Galactic in 2004. Its main focus from the beginning was space tourism, and after years of development, including some setbacks, they announced in February 2022 that they would begin selling tickets for $450,000. In June of 2023, they had their first successful commercial flight. As impressive as this achievement is, it's important to note that Virgin Galactic only carries passengers to the edge of space, not into orbit. But Branson did have orbital ambitions too. He later spun the company Virgin Orbit off of Virgin Galactic, and in January 2021, successfully delivered 10 small satellites into low Earth orbit. After a second failed launch in January 2023, however, the company hit financial hard times and was unable to secure financing. They suspended operations in March 2023, and 2 months later, Virgin Orbit declared bankruptcy. As for Virgin Galactic, it appears that they might be having difficulties as well. Just recently, in December of 2023, Branson announced that he would not put any more of his own money into the company, which is not yet profitable, citing difficulties at Virgin Group, his investment company, due to the COVID pandemic. So they'll just have to try and survive without his financial support going forward. Time will tell. Blue Origin was founded in 2000 by billionaire Jeff Bezos, who, by all accounts, uses his vast fortune to fund his space venture. He has successfully made it to the lower boundary of space, 50 miles above the Earth, several times in his reusable rocket, New Shepard. In fact, New Shepard was technically the first reusable rocket to make it to space, a fact that rankles Elon Musk, with whom Bezos clearly has a space rivalry. Blue Origin also long ago announced the New Glenn rocket, which is massive, though somewhat smaller than SpaceX's Starship. Most recently, Blue Origin's BE-4 rocket engines were used to propel United Launch Alliance's brand new Vulcan rocket on January 8, 2024. The Vulcan rocket successfully deployed a lunar lander, although the lander itself malfunctioned and never made it to the surface of the moon. But Blue Origin by itself has not yet made it to orbit, let alone deliver cargo or people to orbit. It's unclear why that is, but Bezos assures us that New Glenn will have a test launch sometime this year. It's also worth noting that Bezos stepped down as CEO of Amazon 2 years ago to focus on Blue Origin.
The primary reason I did that is so that I could spend time on Blue Origin, adding some, energy, some sense of urgency. We need to move much faster. And we're going to. We are going to become the world's most decisive company across any industry. We're going to get really good at taking appropriate technology risk and making those decisions quickly. Being bold on those things. That's what, and having the right culture that supports that.
Although he didn't explicitly say so, Bezos seems to be saying that Blue Origin's previous leadership wasn't getting it done, and so he had to step in and personally oversee operations. So what's the point of sharing the stories of these two men? Mainly just to show how difficult it is to get a viable space program going, even though you have some of the richest, brightest, and best leaders in the world. These guys have been ultra successful with basically everything they've tackled, and I should point out that Jeff Bezos has a strong science background and was considering a career as a physicist. These are men who have taken the time to educate themselves about rockets, for which the technology for getting to orbit has been around for decades. Getting to space is obviously extremely difficult, but these men's stories make the point even clearer. If brilliant guys like these are having troubles with either the tech or the financial side of things, then exactly what does it take to be successful in the space business? As we mentioned in earlier episodes, SpaceX is dominant in the launch services industry. I don't want to get into a list of SpaceX's achievements just yet, but here's a statistic that kind of illustrates the point. In 2023 alone, SpaceX had 96 successful orbital launches. 96. That's nearly 2 a week, and their pace is still increasing. It bears repeating that space is hard. That luminaries such as Branson and Bezos have struggled so much proves this. On the flip side, it also makes SpaceX's astonishing success all the more remarkable and worthy of admiration. Finally, I want to bring up the story of Andy Beal, a Dallas businessman/billionaire who we mentioned in episodes 10 and 11. He started Beal Aerospace in February 1997, earlier than all the other billionaires we've mentioned. Andy Beal is not a very famous name, but when I call him a businessman, that's just how he made his fortune. Beal is no science slouch. He also happens to be a math whiz, a genius, who learned about aerospace by reading books and talking to engineers and scientists. His strategy and goal, much like Elon's, was to build low-cost rockets for sending commercial payloads into space. Unfortunately, Beal Aerospace closed down in October 2000 without ever making it to space. On the technical side, his company was making decent progress, but that was only one hurdle it had to get over. Even more daunting was the entrenched cronyism within the space industry. Beal complained to the government that its habit of giving contracts to preferred companies like Lockheed and Boeing was unfair. Then in 2000, months after the company had successfully fired one of its engines, the space agency went and did what Beal had feared it would do. It announced it would pursue a multi-billion-dollar program known as the Space Launch Initiative for the development of space vehicles designed to replace the shuttle and be reusable. An expert poker player, Beal knew that the system was rigged. Having already spent about $200 million of his own money getting his company up and running, he chose to shut it all down rather than compete with other companies that were subsidized by the government. Beal Aerospace was effectively taken down by an unfair competitive landscape. Elon and SpaceX would have to face the same monster, and that's what we'll talk about in the next episode.